Welcome back, everybody. I'm Rich, and this is Richard White Global. And as always, where we get into the past to understand the present. But today, folks, before we get started, I want to make it very clear that this video is for historical context and discussion only. It is not meant to promote or support any form of hate or discrimination. The goal here, as always, is understanding, not endorsement. So today, folks, we're tackling a question that seems simple on the surface, but it's actually a lot more complicated once you look at it. Is it acceptable to display a Confederate flag, but not a Nazi flag? And for the context of this video, I'm talking about in the United States. Well, if there is a difference, what exactly is it exactly? Well, to answer that, we simply need to understand what these flags actually represent and what they actually are, and clarify which flag is which. So, what is the Confederate flag? Well, most people today simply believe it's the red flag with the blue cross and the 13 white stars that represent the 13 states of the Confederate States of America that existed from 1861 until 1865 and its demise after the American Civil War. Well, folks, as a matter of fact, that flag that we think is the Confederate flag has never been the Confederate flag. Folks, that flag is simply a battle flag for the Army of Northern Virginia, a regimental battle flag that all armies and navies used past and in the present worldwide to identify themselves. It was simply led by Robert E. Lee during the American Civil War. The Confederacy, as a matter of fact, had multiple national flags throughout its short 4-year tenure. This battle flag became widely used later, especially when it was revived during the Civil Rights era in the 1950s and 60s. And furthermore, my generation really became popular with it as the assumed Confederate flag during the 1980s popular show, The Dukes of Hazzard, where it was prominently displayed on the roof of the main character of the show, the General Lee. So the symbol is most people debate today is not even the national flag of the Confederate States of America. Again, it's simply a battle flag for the Army of Northern Virginia. So let's get into the Nazi flag. Yes, it obviously represents the Nazi Party, the most evil regime in time frame in modern world history. There's no argument there. Absolutely no argument. That flag was designed and put into place by Adolf Hitler himself, probably the most evil human that's ever lived, and I hope God will find a special place in hell for him one day. But folks, it is simply associated with World War II, the Holocaust, and the current neo-Nazi movement that has been going on and still is in some parts of the United States and around the world. But that main symbol, folks, is known as the swastika that everybody identifies with this evil. It's simply a symbol that's existed for thousands of years around the world, long before the Nazi regime ever came into power. Matter of fact, it's still used around the world today. It's hidden in plain sight. You can find it in patterns, in dishes, and all kinds of ornamental decor worldwide. But folks, the original and true meaning of that symbol is good fortune, prosperity, and well-being, believe it or not. What a polar opposite of what the world really assumes it is. The Nazis used it in the 20th century, so that changed the global perception, and rightfully so, and it always will. But that's not what we're talking about today. So, in much of the world today, that older meaning has been completely and overly overshadowed and forgotten about. But most people don't even know the back history, to be honest with you. So what are some key similarities between the two? Well, both were tied to systems that were built on racial hierarchy, no argument there. Both used these as symbols of intimidation, no argument there. Both represent governments that opposed equality and caused widespread human suffering. There's no argument there either. These truths may be hard for some people, but facts are facts. And another thing that people don't think about is both of these broke treaties. The Confederate States of America violated legally the United States Constitution, Article 3, Section 3, which clearly states that if you wage war against the United States, you are in treason. And on the German flip side, they were violating the Versailles Treaty of 1919 that restrained them after World War I for what they had done then. So folks, for many people, these aren't just historical symbols. They're very personal, again, and rightfully so. It's everybody's lived experience. We can't decide what those are for them. This is, again, just for discussion and thought-provoking. So what are some key differences, folks? Well, in the Nazi flag, it's universally recognized meaning of evil, hate, and horror. Rightfully so, no argument. Direct connection to genocide. It has very little ambiguity. It's just simply the Nazi flag. But to be fair, the Nazi flag is horrible, bad, whatever word you can come up with, they all apply. But folks, it's not the ancient symbol. That ancient symbol, again, had very good meaning that's been lost in time. Now let's move to the Confederate flag, which is actually, again, the battle flag for the Army of Northern Virginia. Its meaning is much more debated in the United States, especially in the southern states, which, as a Northerner, I stay pretty neutral on this. I just deal with the facts and history. So let's see what some of those similarities are. Well, some of the people state that regarding the Confederate flag, it's about heritage. Well, Germany has heritage. It had heritage long before the Confederacy, and it still does to this day. Okay, then there's regional identity. Well, Germany is an extremely large region and a very large country that's existed for thousands of years in some way, shape, or form. Then they say, well, the South was in rebellion. Well, rightfully so. Again, legally, they were traitors. But Germany also rebelled against the Versailles Treaty, as I stated, in 1919. So here's some nuances people need to think about. There is intent versus impact, and then there's personal meaning versus public perception. And folks, perception is usually reality as human beings. Now, there are some important distinctions. Governments don't always equally treat their individuals who serve them the same. In both the Confederacy and Nazi Germany, soldiers and sailors fought and died. Some believed in the cause. They loved their country for the most part. Now, there are some common denominators. They both had volunteers, and the majority, though, were conscripted, drafted. They felt a duty to their home, understandably so, and both had limited choices. As a matter of fact, the Confederate States of America came into existence not because of the people's choice, but because of the state's legislators who they alone voted to move into secession from the United States. But in Germany, in 1932, the people democratically voted the Nazi Party into power in their German parliament, which Hitler took control of when he was appointed chancellor in 1933. Now, furthermore, he did outlaw any other party. But again, in 1932, the Nazi Party existed long before he ever joined it. It goes back to the 1920s. He actually just became a member and then took it over. So there is one thing that people don't want to talk about. Neither flag would exist without treason or racism. It's just a fact. So folks, recognizing the humanity of these individuals does not mean endorsing the governments they served. You can acknowledge sacrifice while still being honest about what those systems stood for. Are they racist? There again, that's for you to decide. In my opinion, I don't hide it. I say yes. I say they're both racist, but they are history. So how so? How are they racist? Well, they're both rooted in oppressive systems. They both are used by hate groups. Their impact does outweigh their intent. But to be fair, on the Confederate flag side, they're not always used with racial intent. They're used for ceremony, remembrance, and family history. But they are seen by some also as a cultural identity. But folks, you don't need to separate the symbol from the history that made it powerful. Now, regarding the swastika, again, it's the same symbol used in very different meanings across different contexts around the world. And again, for thousands of years. But the fact is as humans, the dominant modern meaning usually wins out. So is one worse? In my opinion, probably. But you got to look at the context and make your own decision. I only give you the discussion. On the Nazi flag side, it's more universally condemned. There's no dispute. There's a direct connection to genocide of 6 million Jews. The Confederate side, well, their flag, I guess you could say, it's more debated, but it is still tied to slavery and segregation. They're not identical, but they do overlap in some of their representing systems of exclusion and hierarchy. Folks, this isn't about telling you what to think. It's about understanding history and the weight these symbols carry. Until next time, I'm Rich, and this again is Richard White Global. Please like and subscribe and leave your comments. That's how I get the ideas of what we want to do and what we'd like to expand on. Until next time.